to the South Brunswick Township Work Session Meeting of August 7th, 2024. If we could please rise for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mayor, next on the agenda, we have the moment of silence, which has been our custom for many, many years for all of those serving here and abroad to return home safely to their families. And a roll call. Mr. Bierman?
Here.
Mr. Camerata?
Here.
Ms. Grover? Here. Ms. Hockman? Here. And Mr. Carley?
I apologize for being a little tardy, but I am here.
Thank you. And next on the agenda, we have the open public meeting statement. I'll read that aloud. In compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, notice of this meeting was given by way of annual notice filed with the Township Clerk, the Home News Tribune, the North-South Brunswick Sentinel, and the Trenton Times, and posted on the bulletin board in the South Brunswick Municipal Building on January 11th, 2024. Mayor, next on the agenda, we have the public portion. Is there a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on any general items? Come on up.
So can I confirm that talking about the redevelopment has happened later?
Yes.
Okay, so then, hi, Kathleen Gallagher, South Brunswick resident. I did want to, just while I was here, ask, I guess, a question about sidewalks along Route 1 where the shoulder extension project is happening. And I had emailed DOT and I got back some kind of legalese response that I didn't really understand. So I was hoping maybe you all, if had information, or whose responsibility would it be? If Route 1 is a state highway, who would I talk to about sidewalks? Because people walk on the shoulders all the time, and so I just wanted to put that out there on the record to say, I hope that their sidewalks part of the plan, and if not, I would just.
NJDOT, I haven't thought that far in advance.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If I know NJDOT, they have not thought that far in advance.
So it is their responsibility?
It is their responsibility.
Okay.
Mr. Bidlack, the town manager, I want to ask him to write a letter, if under my name, that's fine, to the DOT, asking them, and we would fund it like we did, and maintain it like we did over by Hotel Vicenza. There's a fair number of pedestrians getting T-boned by cars. The math didn't work out for the pedestrians. Mm-hmm. So sidewalk was put in there. It took a while because it is a state agency. So we'll make a formal request to them, and we'll be sure to carbon copy you. Just do me a favor. Send an email to Barbara so she has your address, so when we carbon copy you, it doesn't go to the North Pole USA, it goes to your address.
Email or home address?
Either, whichever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I can do
But do
both.
that through Barbara.
And then I would also like to, say congratulations and thanks for doing that. And, then I'll just add is, I think there should be more sidewalks throughout. My sons wanted to go ride bikes and visit friends, and there was no way to do that. I even had conversations with people. Would it be really bad to let them ride on New Road? And I was convinced yes. So if we had more sidewalks, I think it would be another way to get kids off their screens and out doing physical, healthy things.
Right.
But I look forward to that, and I thank you for considering that.
Give Brian an inventory of those areas that are of concern.
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm off my feed today. Give Brian an inventory of those streets that are of concern. We ended, I think it was last year, the year before, we put sidewalk in front of Ridge Road. And it gets kids out of the street.
Yeah.
Which, because everyone's on their phones ticky-tocking away,
Yeah.
it makes for a safer environment.
Exactly. I thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Seeing no one, is there a motion to close the public portion?
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Mayor, next on the agenda, we have discussions, but there are no items under discussion, so we can move along to manager's report.
Yes, Mayor, I don't have no
official report this evening. The only thing I'd like to do is just remind everyone, last evening's National Night Out was canceled due to the inclement weather, and it was rescheduled for next week, next Tuesday, August 13th. We're gonna give it another shot,
Weather
see what the weather does.
Take another swing, Casey. Yeah.
So if you don't want some free dirty water hot dogs, you know where to go.
That's all I had, thank you.
Okay. Mayor, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. There are 3 items, and if there's no objection, we can move these forward to the next regular meeting for action.
I'm good. Yep. No objections.
We'll move all 3 items on to the next meeting for action. The next item, we have several items here for action tonight. The first one is an ordinance for second reading. This is, we'll have a public hearing on that as well. And this is ordinance number 2024-14. It's adopting the redevelopment plan, block 99, lots 3.213, 8.041, and 14.04 for 119 Mapleton Road, 987 to 1001 Bridge Road, and 4405 US Route 1, and block 99, lots 3.213, 8.041, and 14.04. Is there a motion then to open to the public on ordinance number 2024-14?
Let's open it up.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Come on up, and if you could please state your name for the record.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Stuart Lieberman. I'm an attorney with the firm Lieberman, Blecker, and Sekovich in Princeton. Actually, it's not. Here, I can tell you it's in South Brunswick. It's on Raymond Road. We represent, our firm represents Simi Payne and Stephen Elston, who reside at 983 Ridge Road. We are asking that the governing body not approve this second reading. And I have with me Carlos Rodriguez, who prepared a report that is available. It was emailed, as I understand it, to you, but we also have copies of it. And I'm going to ask Carlos to give you a few minutes to just give you an overview of the report. But before I do so, this plan is really going to wreak a lot of havoc on people that have lived here for a long time. Never expected that they would have buildings that are 70 feet tall behind them. Never expected that they would have to confront tractor-trailer trucks due to warehouses in their neighborhood, or that they would have intensive energy requiring data centers in their neighborhood. The plan doesn't make sense in so many ways. Carlos is going to respond to that, but I'm asking you, everybody here is from South Brunswick. We're all residents, we're all neighbors. Don't do this to them. You're really going to create quite an adverse situation for people who I think really deserve better. I mean, they really should be left alone. There's no reason why market rate, just rezoning couldn't be done to try to get you whatever you want along Route 1. One of these areas is right along Route 1. There's no reason that you couldn't have done that. The plan just doesn't make sense. It's internally inconsistent. But my part right now is to say, please don't do that to these neighbors. This is really going to be regretful and going to cause quite a negative environment for people who I really think deserve better. My clients deserve better. So that's what I'm asking. I introduce to you Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos, why don't you, the report's here, you all have it. There's an extra copy if anybody wants to see it that the clerk has. Mr. Rodriguez, would you provide an overview of the report that you prepared, which is...
I will. So, do you need to swear me in?
No.
Oh, no, sir, you don't need to be sworn in for this public hearing.
I don't need to give you my qualifications or anything like that?
Only if the council asks for them.
If it makes your day, do it.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
I can.
Mr. Rodriguez, can you tell me what your background is in a nutshell? You're a planner, how long have you been, and what do you do?
Over 40 years. I've worked at all levels of government. I've represented all levels, all types of clients.
And you're working for the state now, or you just finished an assignment for the state on the revision of the master plan as well, isn't that correct?
The State Development and Redevelopment Plan,
And you did work
yes.
for the state Planning Commission, too?
I did
Okay.
at one point.
So Mr. Rodriguez, thank you very much. Why don't you give an overview of this report? And the report that you did was dated, what's the date on that, by the way? It's on the first page, I think you have it there. don't you?
July 19.
Okay. Yeah, tell the council, the mayor and council, why you think this is a bad idea from a planning perspective.
Well, before we get to that, the ordinance that you have in front of you, ordinance 2024-14, is not accurate.
Section 3.
The planning board hearing on the consistency, the word consistency was never mentioned. The hearing, before the planning board introduced and voted on a motion to send this back to you, it took maybe 1 minute.
It was last week.
There was no discussion of consistency. There was a subsequent attempt at discussing consistency that was brought on by members of the public, but the matter of consistency was never really
And that
broached.
was after the vote.
That was well after the vote.
So, and
We
the
were
point is-
able to introduce my report to the planning board into the record, but it didn't seem, frankly, very productive for me to testify after the planning board had already acted.
Let me just point out, it's section C on page 1 of the resolution states, "It is hereby found and determined that the above referenced redevelopment plan is consistent with the master plan of South Brunswick." That never happened. So it's the one that makes the determination under the municipal land use law is the planning board. And then they send it back to you. So you know that. You know the procedure, right? So you have your first reading, you send it to the planning board for consistency determination, it comes back. Never happened. They didn't even know what their responsibility was. It was abundantly clear. They had no idea why they were holding it. And the record will speak for itself. The word consistency wasn't mentioned once in the entire hearing. So one problem with this resolution is that it's just inaccurate, and you probably don't want to give me a basis for saying that someplace. So I think you should deal with that respectfully. You know, there's a huge procedural problem. You shouldn't vote on this when the planning board didn't do its job. So I do urge that. Okay, I'm not going to interrupt any longer. Why don't you finish your presentation?
And the other problem with this ordinance is that it only refers to consistency with the municipal master plan, but the redevelopment statute requires a statement or an evaluation of consistency with the master plan of adjacent communities, with the county master plan, and with the state development and redevelopment plan. And none of that was discussed. It's discussed to a certain extent in the redevelopment plan document itself, but the document makes factual inaccuracies and reaches the wrong conclusions. And I can go through that, not to the extent that I did in my report, but just give you some highlights. So your 2018 master plan reexamination report seems to be the most recent expression of the planning board's thoughts regarding planning issues in town. At page 32 through 34, the document addresses the requirements of the municipal land use law that reexamination reports identify any areas that might require an investigation pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law. And in fact, that document identifies quite a few, just not this one. The same document contains extensive recommendations for potential adjustments to the zoning. None of those recommendations apply to the properties that are subject of this report. The entirety of the Princeton Nurseries properties constitute a locally designated historic district and are shown as such in the November 2017 Historic Districts and Resources map of South Brunswick. It doesn't seem like the development program that's being proposed under this redevelopment plan really fits all that well with a locally designated historic district. The same reexamination report, under a section called Changes in 2007 Master Plan Reexamination Report, Goals and Objectives, lists objective D3 of the land use element, which I quote is sufficient land should be provided for expansion of industrial sites. And then in front of it, it has the notation NV, meaning no longer valid. In other words, the master plan doesn't call for any additional industrial sites. But that's essentially what this redevelopment plan will do. I don't know that I want to go through and nitpick the question of consistencies with, Plainsboro or Middlesex County, or even the State Development and Redevelopment Plan, although in that case, I would point out, and by the way, the draft redevelopment plan doesn't even mention consistency with the state plan, but it should. And it's true that the Princeton Nurseries lands are designated as a planning area 2 or a suburban planning area, which is a growth designation under the 2001 plan. But they also have an overlay in the state plan map, and it's a historic overlay, and critical historic overlay, CHS. And lands that have been identified and designated as either critical environmental sites, CES, or CHS, critical historic sites, in the state plan are to be treated as planning area 5, environmentally sensitive planning area. So I should also add that that designation did not come from the State Planning Commission. It came from you. It came from this planning board. This planning board, during the cross-acceptance leading up to the 2001 plan, obviously requested that designation, that overlay. That was not something the State Planning Commission would have initiated, because they don't. So, if, with your permission, I'd also like to make some comments regarding the document that you have in front of you.
Which document do you mean?
The document that calls itself a redevelopment plan. But unfortunately, there's no plan. The document is so vague, that I can't legitimately say that it's a redevelopment plan. If I can't tell if that document is implemented, whether I'm getting 3 buildings on 140 acres, 30 buildings, or 300 buildings, if I can't anticipate that, then I don't know how you could call this a plan. It's basically a recipe for the developer to do anything they want, anything they want. There are some technical problems in the sub areas that the plan sets up, which are supposed to be fluid and can be subject to change. There are consequences because the uses permitted are different in the different sub areas, so it's not inconsequential. But the document doesn't contain a mechanism for moving those lines. And
The lines of the various districts,
the
right?
3 districts,
Yeah.
the 3 districts. And this ordinance indicates that the plan is going to modify the zoning or the zoning map as an overlay. So my question to you is, what lines are you using? And if in the future the developer chooses to move a line, what criteria do you use to evaluate that, and who's going to adjudicate it? Because that's not in the plan. The plan doesn't indicate that, right? I also would suggest that if you look closely at the permitted uses that were selected for each district, you're going to find that there's no rationale for why they were chosen, and no criteria provided for where each of these uses should be placed relative to the other permitted uses. So for example, in District A, a child care facility can be placed adjacent to a data center or a self-storage facility, even though there's no reason to do so, but that's completely open. And in Districts B and C, childcare facilities are allowed adjacent to warehouses, fulfillment centers, and flex industrial uses. Uses that not only have no synergies with each other, but are outright hostile to childcare.
Carlos, B is along Route 1, right? B's got Route 1 frontage?
A little bit, yes. It's it's actually the only one that has Route 1 frontage.
And the uses there were arguably highway frontage uses that they didn't allow in B, isn't that correct?
The uses that are allowed in District B are the same as allowed in District A, except for retail, commercial, and service,
Right.
plus warehousing, distribution, and flex industrial. Honestly, I don't want to nitpick and go through every aspect of this redevelopment plan with which I have issue, but the list of uses is particularly egregious and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Except that it essentially puts the designated redeveloper in the pilot seat and gives them unlimited authority to do whatever they want. And don't think that this is an issue that can be resolved at the planning board level. It's not. The planning board's jurisdiction is severely limited by this proposed redevelopment plan, severely limited. The planning board will not be fixing things during site plan. They will be subservient. The designated redeveloper will be in charge because they're of complete lack of criteria. If you don't have a minimum lot size requirement, you have absolutely no idea what you're going to get. Now, the redevelopment plan does contain other bulk standards. We know it doesn't call for a minimum lot size, but it has some other bulk standards. And one of them is coverage. So there's a maximum coverage of 35% proposed for buildings and structures and a maximum lot coverage of 55%. But these are coverages for the entire plan area, not for individual lots, right? So there is no way of anticipating what portions of the redevelopment area will be covered and what portions will not, or what the ultimate land use pattern will be. That's not something that the planning board has any control over. You're handing control over that to the designated redeveloper. The redevelopment plan also establishes a maximum intensity in the form of a floor area ratio of 0.3 not to be exceeded, exclusive of structured parking. But again, this is for the entire 142 acres, not for individual lots. So if you apply this 0.3 FAR to the entire area, you come up with something slightly over 2.1 million gross square feet of construction, exclusive of parking space structures. But again, where on the site will these 2.1 million square feet end up? The plan doesn't suggest that. That doesn't regulate that. Nobody can anticipate where that's going to happen. So this plan is unusually vague to the point where I would recommend not calling it a plan anymore.
Carl, how many plans have you seen in your career?
I couldn't begin to tell you, but many. And I've reviewed plans by others. I've developed my own plans. I have never seen a more permissive document than the one that you have in front of you. I have never seen a more permissive document, because typically towns like to control what's happening, right? Some level of control. And the redevelopment planning process is often viewed as a way for towns to have additional control over and beyond the controls that are available under the municipal land use law. In this case, we're going exactly in the opposite direction. We're yielding all of the control to the designated redeveloper.
For those reasons, you recommend that this plan be rejected tonight, is that correct?
I do.
And Counselor, I do ask that our report be included in the record, Mr. Womack, okay? Should we mark it or so? I don't know what you do in the governing body.
It needn't be marked. The clerk has commented that it's been distributed to the council.
Yes.
So it will be a part of the minutes with reference, and the record will be kept.
That's fine, I appreciate it. And so the bottom line, Mayor and Council, is this. Look, I know that this is something people want. There's some people that want this, but it's really too broad. It's not ready for prime time yet. This needs more work if it's going to happen at all. It's too open-ended. You're giving up too much control to a developer. There are just too few definitions, too few anything that you would normally find in a redevelopment plan, and too many possibilities for havoc. You've got warehouses. At least get rid of the warehouses. Do you know how many warehouses are empty in New Jersey right now? I've opposed warehouses for the last 3 years. I've gone all over New Jersey. There are so many empty warehouses in New Jersey, and these are special use projects. So what are you going to do when this thing sits empty for a year? And then if it is built, you're going to have tractor-trailer trucks on Ridge Road and other roads that were never designed to have these things. So at a minimum, please kick out these warehouses. Please kick those out. Don't do that to these people. Thank you very much. Unless you have any questions for me, please let me know. If you have any questions for me, please let me know. Otherwise, I thank everybody for their courtesy.
First 2/3 of it, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, happy to. My name is Susan Bristol. I'm the Municipal Policy Specialist from the Watershed Institute. I'm a licensed architect, planner, AICP certified planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a former municipal council person and planning board chair. So I come to you tonight, I don't want to repeat the comments that you just heard, but maybe add some additional ones. But I, too, would recommend that you not approve this plan. I also find it frighteningly vague and really missing the point of a redevelopment plan, which typically will give a municipality an opportunity to require more enhancements. Now, obviously, being from the watershed, we engage in planning goals that include the following priorities. That would be improving water quality, reducing flooding, increasing climate resilience, and engaging in regional approaches. This plan actually does harm not only to your residents, puts them in danger, decreases the quality of our watersheds. It definitely doesn't mitigate the dramatic storm events that we're witnessing due to climate change. As your own alert, your municipal alert that was issued last night confirms. And the better approach would be to consider not only your own residents and the immediate neighbors, but the neighbors downstream of this site and this sub-watershed. Now, normally, when I'm working with towns on redevelopment plans, which is quite a few at the moment, I'm engaging with sites that actually have existing, abandoned, derelict development. This is actually a greenfield. So I'm not even sure if you've met any of the criteria for calling this a redevelopment site. I struggle to find that this is a redevelopment site. But considering that that's what's before you tonight, the bottom line of typical redevelopment plans is that the reason for them is to not to repeat the mistakes of the past and not to allow redevelopers to, create new problems in the environment, but to repair, to restore, and to mitigate all the problems you already have in your town from all the development that predates stormwater regulations and just plain bad practices that we used to engage in. So I'm not going to go through my typical watershed principles for redevelopment planning, since this doesn't seem to be a typical site. But I will just make a few points as to why I think it needs to be amended. So this is environmentally sensitive land. The plan is vague.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick for just a point of record. I believe that Councilwoman Grover left for the balance of the
Yes.
meeting. Okay, so it's noted?
Yes, it is. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
So a redevelopment plan should improve a property and should include enhancements. It should not degrade the lands. The stormwater management, which isn't properly addressed in the redevelopment plan, should require an on-site retention standard, and quality, quantity, and recharge standards should be met as a greenfield. The property could have been managed with zoning changes, as already mentioned, or as a general development plan, which would have had strategic phasing and which would have then had development trigger various requirements that you would have made for the various stages of development. The property has been planned previously in your master plans and plans, has been planned for some land preservation that would actually link existing parks and preserves. The property is supposed to contain trails to link nearby development, the Kingston Historic District, and nearby towns, and there isn't really a clear plan for that either. The percent of impervious cover should be applied after the sensitive lands are removed, not be calculated on the whole parcel. The undevelopable parts of this property, based on streams, corridors, buffers, and wetlands, aren't even identified clearly in this plan. Climate change and storm events we just cannot build like the past, because this puts people in danger. And since I live downstream and I'm actually gathering a bunch of the lower Millstone towns soon to look at a shared watershed improvement plan to meet the MS4 permit, you need to consider your neighbors, your downstream communities, and finally, on the topic of neighbors, the warehouse is a horrible idea, and you're putting it on the border with another town, which is a violation of the good neighbor policies that the State Planning Commission has suggested, which says that undesirable uses in warehouses should not be put on the borders with other towns. Now, I know you're probably asking, why should we be concerned with the Heathcote Brook watershed and its tributaries, which is this site and this subwatershed? It's very clearly identified in your natural resources inventory. There's the little map that looks like this of your subwatersheds, which is a very useful graphic if you haven't thought about the land as a part of a watershed before. But there are opportunities at every scale, at every site, every parcel, every plan, that are important to environmental systems. This land, according to your own reports, has really high recharge value. The soils are really good soils. No surprise, being that there was a nursery there. But all of this development will completely cover those over, which will also have a really negative effect on your neighbors, your town, and the downstream communities. These properties are essentially the headwaters of a tributary to the Heathcote Brook. Headwater streams are well established as the lifeblood of waterways and watersheds, and the quantity and quality of water that travels through any watershed begins with and will only be as good as its headwater tributaries. It should absolutely be standard practice to restore and protect them, and you have an opportunity here on this parcel. Now, the proposed impervious cover is well above what science knows. 10% is when the waterways start becoming impaired. So this plan obviously references 35, 55, depending on which criteria you're looking at. So one would think that knowing all of that, which is common knowledge, that you would have much higher requirements for the stormwater management on this property so that no pollutants, absolutely no runoff, leaves the parcels that are developed. And that's possible. It's a big tract. In a town with historic preservation protections for the built environment, you have numerous communities that are historic. Waterway protections for the natural environment also enhance the health of a community and contribute to the wellness of the residents. So historic districts and properties and natural resources are now seen in the same kind of bucket. They are compatible priorities, and they are essential for human well-being and health. I also just want to call your attention to the watershed's impervious cover assessment. I'm sorry, it was, I believe Rutgers did this one. We've done them for other towns. And this particular watershed is called out that if you were to reduce just the existing development, and this is a almost 10-year-old report by now, but if you were to reduce the impervious coverage in the Heathcote Brook subwatershed by 10%, the annual runoff volume reduction would be 82.9 million gallons. So, I mean, that number probably doesn't mean anything to you, but hopefully it gets you interested in revisiting the impervious cover report, which has a really good discussion on these things. And not only are we worried about the quality of life and the view shed and the historic and natural conditions of this property and its adjacencies, but you're required now with the new MS4 municipal stormwater permit to come up with plans and projects, and you need sites to do that. So with this redevelopment plan, you are limiting not only your municipality, but your taxpayers and your neighborhoods in terms of how you can meet those permit requirements. And those things need to be incorporated in every opportunity, and you should probably be in the middle of that process now because the watershed improvement plans are due within 2 years. So that's just one of several regulatory items that you should be considering but don't appear to have been considered at all in this plan. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak and to be with you again. I really appreciate the work that you do and hope that you and the public and the planning board could spend a little more time on this with some qualified professionals that can help you create a better plan, not only for this community, but for the whole watershed and for the region. Thank you.
I just want to correct you on one thing.
What's that?
I just want to correct you on one thing.
Yeah.
We don't allow you to talk. It's your constitutional right in the Bill of Rights to petition grievances to the government. So it's your inherent right to, you can throw pebbles or flowers at us, whichever way you please, but it's your right to do so.
It may be, but I understand what it's like to be sitting where you sit and hearing the public, and so I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Come on up. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, yes. Karen Linder. I live on Basin Street in Kingston, and active in everything in Kingston that you can be active, basically active in. So I just wanted to talk about a few things today. One of them basically is traffic. I really am concerned about the effect of traffic coming out of this. And I want to kind of hark back to the non-specificness of this plan. When you look at, you know, sort of the development plan, it sort of says no traffic exiting onto Ridge Road, and I agree completely with that, because that's narrow and twisty and deer infested and, you know, not. But the other access onto Mapleton Road, basically when I look at kind of the maps, it's sort of like, well, the road just sort of stops here, and that's and then a miracle occurs. It's not at all clear to me what it is that you're going to do administratively, traffic-wise, to keep things from just kind of going west through Kingston and becoming the west route to Rocky Hill and parts west and 287. So I'd really like to see more specificity here, because you can't really say, yeah, we're administratively going to plan for this without looking at it and saying, how are you going to do that? That's what I want to know, is how are you going to do it? I also have some concerns about the Heathcote Brook. I do a lot of work as a volunteer with Friends of Princeton Nurserylands. Last year, we had a harmful algae bloom in Heathcote Brook. I managed to get my stream stomp with the kids in before it got declared. But this year, I didn't want to do it because I was afraid of the potential adverse effects. So I know that that area is sort of tipped in a balance where recreationally, anything that's going to sort of make it such that I can't bring kids down to Heathcote Brook to look for crayfish will be a problem for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Come on up and state your name for the record, please.
I wouldn't need them. But they come south, right?
Yes, my name is Robert von Zumbusch. I am going to speak basically for myself tonight, not for the organizations which I'm connected with. I'm a member of the Kingston Village Advisory Committee, Friends of Princeton Nursery Land, Kingston Greenways, Kingston Historical Society, the Millstone Valley Preservation Coalition, and various other organizations. I was the chairman of the Mapleton Preserve Commission for 15 years. The last few years I've been an alternate member of the commission. And what I'm going to speak is just specifics about the particular plan which we have seen. And I was also involved in 2003 with discussions about the previous plan, and there were certain things that were made there. One, and I will leave this for you as well, basically an existing zoning 2.3 in the report. There are lots 99.3.213 and 8041, and they're zoned R1. Under the previous plan, these were to be used for stormwater detention, and when the detention facilities were completed, they would become public open space. In addition to that, there were to be biodetention facilities. I would certainly like to see the new detention system put in that is in fact with biodetention facilities rather than the more conventional ones. And that's basically what the state pushes as well. I also think that using these as part of the open space connections is important. And that feature, and they also important, which isn't in the plan, a 200-foot buffer I think is essential. I do think that the stormwater facilities should be more clearly defined in the plan, and these particular lots should be only allowed for open space and detention, not for residential use. Streams and wetlands of 2.4 environmental features. Streams and wetlands, former GDP had the brook, unnamed by USGS but called Harry's Brook by Princeton University, as a basis for a greenway corridor of open space with a trail or trails. This feature should also be specifically incorporated into the GDP. The GDP does mention some of these things as being possibilities, but I think it's important that they be maintained. One of the plan vision, I think that it talks about mindful protection of view sheds is to be provided. That should include the Mapleton Preserve as well as residential areas and so on. 3.1, plan vision. The Mapleton Preserve again should be added to that for the view sheds. And the plan goals, I think another, which is 3.2, a bulleted item should be added, recognition of the historic landscape of the former Princeton nurseries and its character-defining features such as the windrows, as the tree rows were called, should be added to the bulleted items. The development districts mentions warehousing and distribution centers. Later in the report, it does mention that basically these are for related to and supporting a principal use. I think that same sentence should be, or clause should be put in with the other one as well. I think what's really important is that any warehousing is strictly not a major distribution for off-site use. That's what is really a problem. If it's something related specifically to the individual use and it's small, that's one thing. Access and circulation, the plan mentions no access from Ridge Road. I think that's absolutely essential. Really would be difficult to have access to Mapleton Road, but the previous plan did mention that, and I think it should be added. It wouldn't, there's no way that would change. Then the other thing is that I do think that I would recommend that tree rows between the paths and the sidewalks on the major access routes be included as something that's desirable. Open space, I think efforts to connect the Mapleton Preserve Commission path plan and other trails is important. The Mapleton Preserve Commission path plan should be incorporated as far as possible, and I have a copy of that here, which I will leave with this. In terms of stormwater, I think that it's essential, again, under 4.12, the buffer adjacent to the residential land is required, and that's good. But berms should not be permitted. That's not in character of the historical landscape. And in the previous plan, I believe they were deleted. Then the only other things are stormwater. would be interested, it would be desirable to know just how much more is going to be put in. Princeton earlier plan, Princeton University's plan, had it actually all designed. But I understand, of course, it's a different plan and the requirements may be different. In landscaping, the existing tree rows, which were called windrows, should be incorporated into the site plans wherever possible. I realize this is not always possible, but there should be an effort made to do that. There are just two other things which I just mentioned offhand. One is that in 4.17, architecture and design, I think that's really unusually, as an architect, I would just say that's unusually restrictive. The concept of how the buildings are designed and so on. In historic preservation, which I've been involved in for a long time, that is just not possible to do. I think this is, that's considered aesthetics and it's not allowed. And I think that's overdone. The concept that colors have to change. One has to just look around in some of the towns around here, such as Plainsboro, to see where some things have been done. And really architecturally, it's a disaster. But that's, I'm not including that in my thing. I do want to say that certainly stormwater and regional approach to it is really critical. I do understand this really is a responsibility of the state, and the state has not put up adequate regulations for years. And I personally am a victim of that. But I do think that that is something I understand in this case. The developer is working on what plans, what regulations actually exist. And I think, unfortunately, that's a problem. Regulations are terrible. And in terms of traffic, I would just say that obviously if they're distribution warehouses, such as there are many here in this town, are put on the property, as opposed to things that are just related to what's on the property, the effect in Kingston, Route 27 is a federally designated truck highway, and it's going to be a major problem. Those are just comments, and I will leave a copy of those comments and the plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. Ed Russo, Carlstadt, New Jersey. I'm part of the principal group that acquired the Princeton Nurseries property from the university in the earlier part of this year. And I just wanted to make a couple very brief comments in response to some of the questions and concerns that were raised. We do think, after closely studying the redevelopment plan, that it should be adopted tonight. If you look at the history of the zoning on this property, and particularly the GDP that's been in place for over 20 years now, I think the township and its planning professionals were very careful to make sure that they crafted this redevelopment plan so that it did not allow a greater intensity of development than what the GDP allowed and what the zoning has been for many years. Specifically, the building coverage that's allowed, 35%, the impervious coverage that's allowed, those are both identical to what's in the GDP. The GDP did not result in any development on this site. And I think, the township's goal in this new redevelopment plan is not to allow a greater intensity of development, but to build some additional flexibility into the plan, particularly with the types of uses that are allowed, to finally spur some development on the property. We have had an opportunity between the last hearing when the plan was introduced and tonight's hearing to share our initial concept plan for the site with a number of the residents that are here in attendance. Some of the concerns that were raised about, for example, the extent of warehousing. Our concept plan is not proposing very much warehousing because the redevelopment plan that's being considered tonight only allows warehousing in one of the 3 districts. District B, which is the district that has frontage on Route 1. It's over 1,000 feet from the nearest residential property line. A substantial portion of District B is covered by the brook that runs through the property that's regulated by the DRCC and also by the DEP. So when you really closely look at the districting, the permitted uses, specifically with respect to warehousing, it's clear that the intent of the redevelopment plan is not to allow warehousing widespread throughout the property. And I can tell you from, our intent as, the property owners, and I'm here with one of our colleagues, Steve Santola, is not to, fill this site with warehousing. And the redevelopment plan that's being proposed does not allow that. Few of the comments that were made with respect to stormwater management, this property, because of the DEP's requirements and the DRCC's requirements, is heavily regulated from a stormwater management point of view. We're sure that the township also has its own stormwater management regulations. I can assure you that we're going to be very sensitive to stormwater management on this property. The 200-foot residential buffer along the northern edge of the property, we have had a chance to interact with some of the neighbors that abut the site. We've gotten some comments about what's being proposed in the buffer area. In areas where there's mature vegetation, we are committed to maintaining that vegetation. The only berming or additional landscaping that's being proposed in the buffer area are in places where there isn't mature vegetation. And there are, even though the buffer today is fairly heavily wooded, there are some places where it's sparse, which would be appropriate for berming, but certainly it's not our intent to berm in places where we'd be doing more harm than good. The last thing that I would say is again, we're asking that the governing body complete the process that it began and adopt the plan. We are willing to continue to engage with interested parties, share our concept plan. We hope to be before the planning board in the near future with a formal submission. And, we are going to be very sensitive to recommendations, comments, suggestions. We do want to be a good neighbor, and I think there's a lot that can be done on this property that's consistent with the historical zoning, but also with this new plan that'll hopefully, finally unlock redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, good evening. This is Steve. I'm Steve Santola from Woodmont Properties. Just wanted to add on to what Ed had said. There were 3 changes, minor changes that were made to the plan that I don't think some of our neighbors were privy to. There is a prohibition of access out onto Middleton Road. That's in the plan now.
Mapleton, you mean?
Mapleton Road, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Middleton.
I'm sorry.
We
And
have people
the
from
lot
Monmouth
next
County.
to Mr. Rodriguez's client was also amended to make sure that it wouldn't be developed. It can only be used for certain limited things. And thirdly, there was a plan floating around from the old days, a sketch that included walking paths that went around some of the existing basins, et cetera. And in order to work with the Mapleton Preserve folks, we have agreed to try and work that into, and it's in the redevelopment plan now, to make efforts to try and work that plan into the existing walking paths that come out of the preserve. And I would also just remind the council, and I'm sure many of you know, and I don't know that everybody else knows, that the preserve exists because the university many years ago donated all of those acres, and the exchange was the zoning that was put on in the GDP 20 years ago. So this was a concept that's been in place for years and years and years. The redevelopment plan is simply a wrinkle to what was always intended. And I think that's the way it was prepared. It's got many, many bulk requirements, setbacks, parking lot setbacks. The suggestion that 100 buildings could be built on this redevelopment area is lunacy. So I think it was done carefully. It was done over a long period of time, and it was done with conversations with both us and with the neighbors. And we would hope that it would get approved tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Please state your name for the record.
Linda Strange. I'm a 34-year resident of Kingston. I'm also an architect and a construction official. I'm here on my own behalf, but I currently work in planning, development, and design for Rutgers University. I am very pro-development, but from the little bit that I've heard about this redevelopment plan, I am exceedingly concerned that uses are to be allowed that are totally inappropriate to this particular piece of property. Warehouses, data centers, light industrial is not what this area needs. There are other places in the town and the region for those pieces. Currently, we have major trouble with stormwater off of Route 1 at Ridge Road. We have major trouble with stormwater on Mapleton Road. I don't know if the redevelopment plan is addressing stormwater management enough to improve that or keep that condition from worsening. I would encourage the township to consider redevelopment of this property with the state highway development, especially around Ridge Road and College Road, to make certain all traffic can handle those intersections, because currently, particularly at Ridge Road, it's not handled well enough. We don't have enough stacking of cars to cross Ridge Road. As somebody that lives at the other end of Mapleton Road, I see the stacking of cars there. So please be very cautious about what kind of development you're encouraging. The traffic, the stormwater, and the general character of the area. We love South Brunswick, and we don't want it to become an industrial site. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, is there a motion to close the public portion?
Motion to close the public portion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion then to finally adopt ordinance number 2024-14?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a roll call. Mr. Bierman?
Yes.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Ms. Hockman? Yes. And Mr. Carley?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Next on the agenda, we have resolutions, items number 1 through 4. If there's no objection, we can have a motion to adopt all 4 together. If you'd like one pulled, let me know.
Just give me a second. Yeah. No, I'm good. We can move them forward.
All 4?
Yeah.
We have a motion by Mr. Bierman and a second, Mr. Camerata, and a roll call. Mr. Bierman?
Yes.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Ms. Hockman? Yes. And Mr. Carley?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Next on the agenda, we have the voucher list of August 7th, 2024. Is there a motion to accept the voucher list?
Motion to pay the bills.
Second. And a roll call. Mr. Bierman?
Yes.
Mr. Camerata?
Yes.
Ms. Hockman? Yes. And Mr. Carley?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. We're at the point now where we go into executive session. If there is no objection, we can have a motion to go into executive session and then to adjourn immediately thereafter.
Motion made.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Good night, everyone. Let me just shut this all off.
To